The cold emptiness of space stretched out before the crew of the Astronova. The ship drifted silently through the void, its engines humming faintly, a steady reminder of the human presence aboard. Captain Lucas Jensen stood at the command deck, staring out at the distant stars. The mission was simple: explore an uncharted planet, gather data, and return home. But the moment they approached this distant world, everything changed. The planet, located in the dark corners of the galaxy, had been detected only a few months ago. At first, the scans had shown nothing remarkable, just a barren, lifeless rock. Yet something about it had intrigued the scientific community. And now, here they were, about to be the first humans to set foot on this strange world. "We're almost there," said Lieutenant Maya, the ship's lead engineer. She adjusted the instruments, her hands moving with practiced speed. "Nothing out of the ordinary, Captain. All systems are stable." Captain Jensen nodded but couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his gut. There was something unsettling about this mission, something he couldn't explain. He glanced at his crew, each of them focused on their tasks. They were well-trained, capable. But today, something felt off. "Keep your eyes peeled," he said. "We don't know what's out there." The ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, breaking through thick clouds of gas and dust. The surface of the planet came into view, and the crew stared in awe. They had expected a barren wasteland, but what they saw was far more puzzling. The landscape was dotted with enormous, jagged mountains and vast plains. The ground seemed cracked and scarred, as if it had been ravaged by some ancient battle. But it was what they couldn't see that made Captain Jensen's blood run cold. "We're getting strange readings, Captain," Lieutenant Turner, the tactical officer, said. "There's something beneath the surface, something large." Jensen leaned forward. "How large?" Turner's eyes widened as the numbers on his screen grew. "I don't know. Bigger than anything we've ever seen. The scans can't penetrate too deep, but it's definitely there." Jensen felt a chill run down his spine. They were not alone. Whatever was on this planet, it was huge, and it was hiding just below the surface, waiting. "Prepare to land," he ordered, his voice steady, though inside, a storm was brewing. "We're going down." The Astronova made its descent. The ship's landing gears hit the ground with a gentle thud, the only sound in the eerie silence of the alien world. The crew scrambled to secure their gear, double-checking their weapons and supplies. The planet may have seemed empty, but Captain Jensen had learned long ago never to trust appearances. As the hatch opened and the crew stepped out onto the planet's surface, a strange sensation filled the air. It was as if the planet itself was watching them, waiting for them to make the first move. The wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of something ancient. The ground was hard and cracked, and the air tasted metallic. "Stay sharp," Jensen commanded. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." The team moved cautiously, scanning the environment with their equipment. They hadn't seen anything yet, no signs of life, no structures, no movement. Just silence, the kind of silence that was unnerving. And then, they found it. A massive footprint. The size of a small building, it was embedded deeply in the ground, surrounded by strange markings. The crew gathered around, kneeling to inspect it. "What made this?" Lieutenant Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jensen's eyes narrowed as he studied the tracks. The size alone told him this was no ordinary creature. It was something big, something terrifying. He could feel it in his bones. The predator they had been warned about, the one that had wiped out entire species on this planet, was real. And it was still here. "We need to keep moving," Jensen said, though his voice was strained. "This is just the beginning." The crew continued their trek, but every step felt heavier. The air seemed to grow thicker, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. As they ventured deeper into the landscape, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. There was something lurking in the shadows, something massive, and it wasn't just a remnant of the past. It was alive, and it was hunting. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, growling noise echoed through the canyon. The sound was deep, resonating in their chests. The crew froze, their breath catching in their throats. They weren't alone. "Captain," Maya said, her voice trembling. "What is that?" Jensen didn't answer. His eyes darted around, scanning the horizon. He had no idea what they were facing, but one thing was clear: the planet wasn't as dead as they thought. Something ancient and dangerous was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before he could speak, the ground shook again, more violently this time. The air grew thick with the scent of something primal, something old. The creature was close, and it wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. The tremors that shook the ground seemed to pulse through the air, sending ripples across the barren landscape. Captain Lucas Jensen motioned for the crew to fall back, but their movements were slow, uncertain. The low growl that echoed through the canyon was too powerful, too close. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken threat. The team huddled together, weapons at the ready, scanning the horizon. Their surroundings were eerily quiet now, as if the planet itself had held its breath. The growling had stopped, but the tension remained. It was worse now, because they didn't know what was out there. Whatever it was massive and waiting for the right moment to strike. "Stay close," Jensen ordered, his voice calm but laced with urgency. His heart was racing, but he couldn't let the crew see his fear. The last thing they needed was panic. Lieutenant Maya tightened her grip on her rifle, her eyes darting nervously. "Captain, whatever it is, it's huge. I've never seen anything like it on the scanners." Jensen nodded grimly. The size of the creature alone was enough to make anyone's blood run cold. But it wasn't just the creature's size that had him worried. It was the fact that they hadn't seen it yet, hadn't heard it until it was right on top of them. Whatever it was silent, deadly, and fast. "We need to keep moving," Jensen said, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in his chest. "Get to higher ground. We need a better view." The crew made their way toward a rocky outcrop in the distance, moving cautiously, their footsteps barely making a sound on the dry earth. The landscape around them was a vast, desolate wasteland, with jagged cliffs and deep canyons stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay, but nothing prepared them for what they would find when they reached the top. As they reached the ridge, the first sight of the creature was enough to stop them in their tracks. A massive figure, its shape barely visible against the dark sky, emerged from the shadows of the canyon below. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Its body was covered in thick, scaly armor, reflecting the dim light of the planet's twin moons. Its eyes glowed a deep red, and its jaws were lined with sharp, jagged teeth that could tear through metal as easily as flesh. The creature moved with terrifying speed, its enormous body gliding across the landscape like a shadow, leaving destruction in its wake. It was hunting, and the crew was its prey. "This is it," Turner, the tactical officer, whispered, his voice shaky. "This is what's been causing the readings. This thing, it's not like anything in our records." Jensen's mind raced as he assessed the situation. They couldn't outrun it. They couldn't hide. They were outmatched, outnumbered, and unprepared. But they had to survive. They had to fight back. "Prepare for battle," Jensen said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "We need to take it down. We'll make a stand here." The crew scrambled into position, weapons raised. Jensen knew that they couldn't let the creature get any closer. It was only a matter of time before it realized they were here, and when it did, there would be no escape. They waited in silence, the only sound the thudding of their hearts. The creature was still in the distance, moving through the dark like a phantom. Its massive form seemed to grow larger with each passing second, drawing closer and closer. Jensen's breath caught in his throat as the creature's gaze finally fixed on them. Its eyes, glowing with a predatory hunger, locked onto the crew. It knew they were there, and it was coming for them. "Fire!" Jensen shouted, and the crew opened fire, their weapons unleashing a storm of bullets toward the beast. The creature roared in fury as the projectiles slammed into its armored hide. The sound was deafening, like thunder cracking across the sky. But the creature didn't stop. It was barely fazed by the attack. It seemed impervious to the weapons they had. "Fall back!" Jensen shouted, his voice laced with panic. They had underestimated the creature. It was too powerful. But as they turned to retreat, the creature charged, its massive form moving with an unimaginable speed. It was on them in an instant, its claws slashing through the air. Maya barely managed to dodge the creature's first strike, but she wasn't fast enough. The creature's claws raked across her arm, sending a spray of blood into the air. She screamed in pain, falling to the ground. "Get her out of here!" Jensen roared, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature was relentless. It wouldn't stop. Turner and the others pulled Maya to safety, but they were quickly realizing they had no chance of escaping this nightmare. Jensen's mind raced. They needed a new plan, and fast. They couldn't keep fighting the creature with conventional weapons, but he couldn't let his crew fall. Not now. He glanced up at the ridgeline where they had first spotted the creature. There was something there, something that might give them an edge. It was a long shot, but they had no other choice. "Everyone, follow me," Jensen barked, leading the crew toward the edge of the canyon. "We're going to use the terrain to our advantage." As they moved, the creature roared again, and Jensen knew they didn't have much time. This was their only chance. The team sprinted across the uneven ground, their boots pounding against the rocky terrain. Captain Lucas Jensen's heart was racing, and the sound of it seemed deafening in his ears. Behind them, the growl of the beast echoed across the canyon, a constant reminder that death was right on their heels. Jensen turned to glance at his crew. Maya was still clutching her injured arm, but she was keeping up, determined not to slow them down. Turner, the tactical officer, was scanning the horizon, looking for any advantage they could exploit. The others were close behind, their faces grim but resolute. "We can't outrun it, Captain," Turner said, his voice tight with strain. "We need a plan, and fast." Jensen knew Turner was right. The creature had proven itself to be more than just a physical threat. It was cunning, relentless, and faster than they could have ever imagined. Every time they thought they had a moment to breathe, it was already upon them, ready to strike again. They had to change the game. "We're heading for that outcrop," Jensen said, pointing to a rocky formation in the distance. "We'll make our stand there. We can use the high ground to our advantage." The others nodded, but Jensen could see the doubt in their eyes. They were all thinking the same thing. Could they really defeat something so powerful with only their weapons and a bit of higher ground? It seemed like a long shot, but it was their only option. The growls of the beast grew louder, the sound of its massive body crashing through the underbrush, shaking the earth beneath them. They weren't going to make it to the outcrop in time. The creature would catch them before they reached it. "Get down," Jensen shouted as he suddenly dropped to the ground, pulling Maya and Turner down with him. The others followed suit, scrambling into the sparse cover offered by the rocks and the dry, thorny shrubs. The creature's silhouette emerged from the dust, moving like a shadow, its massive form dominating the landscape. Its glowing eyes scanned the area, and Jensen's blood ran cold as it stopped just short of where they had been running. It was hunting them. It could smell their fear. Jensen's mind raced. They had no time to waste. The creature was too close. If they didn't act soon, they would be trapped. "We need to lure it away," Jensen said, his voice low but filled with determination. "Turner, you and I will create a diversion. The rest of you, get to the outcrop. We'll cover you." Turner looked at Jensen, his expression dark. "Are you sure this will work?" "I'm sure," Jensen said, though inside, he wasn't so certain. The creature was too dangerous, too unpredictable. But he had no choice. They had to try. "All right, "Let's do it," Turner said, nodding to Jensen. The plan was simple, but incredibly risky. Jensen and Turner would draw the creature's attention, using themselves as bait, while the rest of the crew made their way toward the high ground. If they could get there, they might have a chance to mount a defense, to fight back with the terrain in their favor. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. Jensen quickly formulated a strategy. He and Turner would move to the left, circling around the beast, hoping to confuse it. Meanwhile, the others would move to the right, heading for the outcrop. It was a dangerous move, and there was no guarantee it would work, but it was their best shot. "On my signal," Jensen whispered, gripping his rifle tightly. He could feel the weight of it, but his mind was focused. This was their moment. The creature's massive form shifted, its eyes locking onto them. It was aware of their presence now. The air around them seemed to hum with anticipation. This was it, the moment they had been dreading. Jensen nodded at Turner. "Go." They both sprang from their cover, moving in opposite directions. The creature reacted instantly, its glowing eyes following them as it charged. Its speed was shocking, faster than anything they had ever imagined. Jensen fired a few quick shots at the creature, hoping to distract it long enough for the others to make it to safety. The shots seemed to have little effect, only angering the beast further. It howled in fury, the sound so loud it rattled the bones of those within earshot. Turner kept moving, zigzagging to avoid being hit, but Jensen couldn't afford to waste time looking back. His focus was entirely on staying ahead of the creature, making sure it didn't catch up to them. Behind him, Jensen could hear the others scrambling toward the outcrop. They were close, but the creature wasn't letting up. It was relentless, its eyes locked on its prey. Jensen's heart raced as the creature closed in on him. He could hear the ground trembling with each step it took. He had to buy more time. "Turner, keep it moving," Jensen shouted as he fired again, drawing the creature's attention away from the others. The beast veered slightly to the left, its focus now on Jensen. It was almost upon him, its massive claws swiping at the air, when suddenly there was a loud crash from behind. The creature turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted. "Now!" Jensen screamed, and the others made a break for it, racing toward the outcrop as quickly as they could. Jensen didn't wait to see if they made it. He kept moving, but he knew they had only seconds before the creature would be back on them. He had to get to higher ground too. The sound of the creature's claws scraping against the rocks filled the air. Its growls echoed through the canyon, a chilling reminder of the danger that was closing in. Jensen's heart pounded in his chest as he and Turner reached the outcrop, the rocky formation rising sharply ahead of them. The rest of the team had made it up first, taking shelter in the narrow crevices and behind large boulders, their rifles aimed at the approaching beast. But even from their elevated position, Jensen knew they couldn't let their guard down. They had no idea how long the creature would wait before charging again. "We're going to need more firepower," Turner said, his voice steady despite the situation. "I don't think our rifles will hold it off for long." Jensen nodded, glancing around quickly. The outcrop was a good spot. It gave them a vantage point, but it also left them vulnerable to the creature's attacks if they weren't careful. They needed a plan, something that would give them the edge they so desperately needed. "We can't just shoot it down," Jensen muttered to himself, more to calm his nerves than anything else. "But maybe we can trap it." Maya, who was crouched low behind a boulder, overheard him. "Trap it? How? This thing is bigger than our entire ship." "It's our only shot," Jensen said, turning to face her. "We'll use the terrain to our advantage. If we can force it into a narrow passage between those two cliffs, we can trap it there and use the environment against it." Turner raised an eyebrow. "You're sure about this?" Jensen looked at the beast below, pacing back and forth. The creature was massive, its body nearly the size of their shuttle, with scales that shimmered like steel in the harsh sunlight. It was waiting, watching them, its eyes glowing with hunger and intelligence. "I don't see any other options," Jensen replied. The plan was simple but risky. They would draw the creature into the narrow gap between the cliffs. Once it was there, they would use explosives to trigger a rockfall, sealing the creature inside. It wasn't a foolproof plan, and there was a good chance the creature would resist or even break through. But it was the only chance they had. "I'll need to set up the charges," Turner said, already unstrapping his pack and pulling out the explosive devices. "I'll place them at the far end of the gap. You'll need to lure it in close enough before I trigger them." Jensen nodded. "We'll keep it distracted. You just make sure those charges are set." It was a dangerous gamble, but it was all they had. With a final look at his team, Jensen gave the order. "On my signal, we move." The plan was put into motion, and every second felt like an eternity. Jensen and Maya moved first, crouching low to avoid being seen by the creature. They slowly moved to the edge of the outcrop, peering down at the beast below. It was still circling, its eyes scanning for any movement. "Get ready," Jensen whispered. Turner was already at the back of the gap, placing the last of the charges. He gave a thumbs up to signal that he was ready. Jensen raised his rifle, taking aim at the creature's head. He fired a few warning shots, hoping to get its attention. The sound echoed through the canyon, and the creature immediately turned, its glowing eyes locking onto them. It roared, a terrifying sound that sent shivers down their spines. It was coming. "Now," Jensen shouted. The creature charged, moving faster than they had anticipated. It was like a freight train, its body tearing through the rocky landscape. But Jensen didn't hesitate. He and Maya sprinted to the edge of the gap, drawing the beast's focus even further away from Turner and the explosives. The creature was almost upon them when Turner activated the detonator. The ground shook as the explosives went off, sending a cascade of rocks tumbling down toward the beast. The gap between the cliffs was narrow, and the falling rocks filled it quickly, trapping the creature within. For a moment, everything was still. The dust cloud from the explosion hung thick in the air, and Jensen could barely see through it. He had no idea if the creature was alive, injured, or even still there. "Is it trapped?" Maya asked, her voice tense. "I don't know," Jensen replied. "We'll have to wait for the dust to settle." It felt like hours, but slowly the dust began to clear. When it finally did, they saw the creature, half buried under the rubble, its massive form struggling against the rocks. It was trapped, but it wasn't finished. Its eyes locked onto Jensen, filled with pure hatred. "We don't have much time," Turner said, stepping up beside Jensen. "It's going to get out. We need to finish it now." Jensen nodded, his grip tightening around his rifle. "On 3, we fire." They took their positions, aimed, and counted down. 1, 2, 3. Gunfire erupted from all sides as they opened fire on the creature. The shots hit their mark, but the creature kept thrashing, its immense strength defying the onslaught. It was going to be a battle to the very end. The creature's enraged roars echoed in the canyon, shaking the very ground beneath them. It was clear that the explosive trap had only slowed it down. Despite the rubble that pinned its massive form, the beast's powerful limbs continued to thrash. It was like nothing they had ever encountered before. Its strength, resilience, and fury were unmatched. Jensen's team had already fired several rounds into the creature, but it didn't seem to be enough. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto him, burning with pure hatred. It was not going down easily. "We need to finish this now," Turner shouted, his voice sharp, but even he was starting to look worried. Jensen's eyes narrowed as he watched the beast struggle to free itself. There was a limited amount of time before it would break free. If they didn't act fast, the creature would escape, and they would be in even more danger than before. "We need more firepower," Maya said, quickly checking her weapon's ammo. She looked at Jensen, determination in her eyes. "We have a backup plan, right?" Jensen glanced at the others, his mind racing. He had one final option, something they hadn't dared to use until now. It was risky, but it might be the only thing that could take down the beast. "We do," Jensen said, his voice steady, but his pulse quickening. He signaled to Turner, "Get to the shuttle. We'll cover you." Turner nodded without hesitation and dashed for the nearby rocks, taking cover as he moved. Jensen and Maya followed closely behind, their weapons raised and ready. The creature's eyes followed their every move, its growls filling the air as it prepared for another charge. They reached the shuttle in record time, the creature still trapped but trying to push the boulders off itself. Turner was already inside the shuttle, ready to fire the secondary weapons. Jensen and Maya jumped into position, their rifles still aimed at the creature. "Ready," Jensen said, his voice low but clear. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Turner would fire the shuttle's main cannon directly at the creature, aiming for its vital areas, while they kept it distracted long enough for the blast to land. They didn't have much time. The creature's claws scraped against the rocks, and with a sudden roar, it surged forward, its massive body straining against the pile of rubble. It was moving faster than they expected. "It's breaking free," Maya shouted, her eyes wide with alarm. "Stay focused," Jensen snapped. "Turner, now." The shuttle's engines roared to life, and the sound of the cannon charging was deafening. Turner fired. The massive blast from the shuttle's cannon hit the creature with terrifying force. The creature shrieked as the explosion tore into its side, sending shockwaves through the canyon. For a moment, the beast was consumed by the smoke and debris, its massive body twisted in the impact. Jensen watched, holding his breath. But the creature wasn't finished yet. It shook off the debris and let out a primal roar, its glowing eyes fixed on them. The blast had injured it, but not enough to stop it completely. It was relentless. "We need another shot," Turner yelled, his voice strained with effort. He aimed the cannon again, but the creature was too close. It was charging straight at them, faster than ever before. "Hold your fire," Jensen ordered. He knew if they missed now, the creature would be on top of them in seconds. The beast reached the shuttle's position, its claws slashing through the air as it closed in. Jensen and Maya fired their rifles in a final desperate attempt to slow it down. The bullets ricocheted off its armored hide, barely making a dent. But they didn't stop. They kept firing. With a deafening roar, the creature leaped, its massive body hurtling toward them. Time seemed to slow as Jensen braced for impact. But just before the beast reached them, a loud explosion rang out. This time, from inside the shuttle. Turner had fired the final shot, the shuttle's secondary cannon unleashing a massive blast directly at the creature. The impact was enough. The creature howled in pain as the force of the blast tore through its body. It fell to the ground with a deafening thud, lifeless. Jensen stared at the creature's fallen form, his heart racing. He could hardly believe it was over. The massive predator, a force of nature that had terrorized the galaxy, was finally dead. The battle was over, but there was no time for celebration. Jensen's team quickly moved into position, securing the area. They needed to be sure the creature was truly dead, that there was no chance of it coming back. Turner was the first to approach the fallen beast, carefully scanning it for any signs of movement. "It's finished," he said, his voice low but relieved. Maya exhaled, her hand still gripping her weapon tightly. "We did it," she said, barely able to believe it. Jensen nodded, but his mind was already shifting to what came next. The galaxy would learn of this victory, of humanity's ability to face unimaginable danger and come out victorious. But there was still so much more to uncover, so much more to explore. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only just begun to show what it was capable of. As the team regrouped and made their way back to the shuttle, Jensen looked out over the canyon one last time. They had survived the worst, but something told him that their adventure was far from over. The shuttle hummed softly as it glided through the barren atmosphere of the alien planet. The team had completed the mission, and their victory over the beast would be remembered across the galaxy. However, something didn't sit right with Jensen. The mission had been a success, but there was an uneasy silence hanging over them, What they had just witnessed, what they had just done, felt like only the beginning. The shuttle was en route back to their base on the nearby colony moon, but Jensen couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. They had discovered the creature's true strength, but there were still so many questions left unanswered. Why had the creature been on the planet in the first place? What else was out there in the depths of the galaxy? Jensen's thoughts were interrupted when Maya entered the cockpit. Her face was grim, a sense of urgency in her eyes. "Jensen, you need to see this," she said quietly, motioning for him to follow. He followed her to the rear of the shuttle, where the rest of the team had gathered. Turner, usually the first to crack a joke, sat in silence, his face drawn. They were all waiting for him to speak, their eyes locked on the data terminal in front of them. Jensen stepped up to the terminal and saw a series of encrypted images flashing across the screen. At first glance, they appeared to be nothing more than random scans from the creature's lair, but something about them caught his attention. "Maya," Jensen muttered, his voice low. "What is this?" "I don't know," she replied, her fingers hovering over the terminal's controls. "We found these scans on the creature's home planet while we were gathering intel. It looks like these scans are from inside the beast's body. Something was implanted inside of it." Jensen leaned in closer, his brow furrowed. The images were becoming clearer, revealing what appeared to be some sort of alien technology embedded deep within the creature's organs. This isn't just a predator," he whispered, realization dawning on him. The team fell silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. "It's being controlled," Turner said, his voice a mix of shock and horror. "Someone made it do this." Jensen's mind raced. They had thought the creature was simply a predator, a force of nature beyond their understanding. But now, it seemed that it had been more than that. It was a weapon, a tool used by something else. "We need to find out who did this," Jensen said firmly, his voice steady despite the rush of thoughts in his head. "We need answers." Maya quickly began pulling up more data, accessing other scans from the creature's lair. "I'm finding something else," she said, her fingers flying over the controls. "There are other signs of similar technology scattered across the planet. It's like someone was studying these creatures, using them for something. But why?" Jensen's pulse quickened. He couldn't let his mind wander too far. The implications were huge. Someone had created a monster. Someone had been experimenting on these creatures, turning them into weapons. And that someone was still out there. He looked at his team, each of them processing the weight of the discovery. They had come to this planet expecting to fight a monster, but they had uncovered something far more sinister. "Prepare for a detour," Jensen ordered, turning back to Maya. "We need to find the source of this technology." Without waiting for a response, Jensen tapped a few commands into the shuttle's controls, rerouting their course. They were no longer headed to the base. Instead, they were headed for the coordinates that Maya had uncovered from the scans. The planet's distant moon had something hidden beneath its surface, something far more dangerous than any beast they had fought. "We're going to find out who's behind this," Jensen said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "And we're going to stop them before it's too late." The shuttle accelerated, the stars outside streaking by as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Jensen stared out of the window, his mind running through every possible scenario. Whoever was behind the creation of these creatures wasn't going to let them off easy. This wasn't just about stopping a predator. It was about stopping an entire galactic threat. Maya and Turner were already prepping their gear, double-checking their weapons and supplies. Jensen couldn't afford to let anything slip through the cracks. They were walking into unknown territory, and he couldn't afford to let his team, or the galaxy, down. As the shuttle neared the surface of the moon, the silence in the cabin was deafening. Every member of the team knew the stakes now. This wasn't just another mission. This was something bigger. They had uncovered the first clue in a galaxy-wide mystery, and there was no turning back. The shuttle began to descend into the moon's dense atmosphere, the thick clouds obscuring their vision. Jensen's eyes narrowed as the coordinates came into view, a small facility hidden in the mountains. It was abandoned, or so it seemed. But deep beneath the surface, Jensen knew they would find answers. The shuttle landed with a soft thud, and Jensen motioned for the team to prepare for whatever lay ahead. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "Stay sharp. We don't know what's down there." They stepped out into the cold, alien landscape. The mountain loomed in the distance, its peak shrouded in mist. They were about to enter the unknown. The moon's surface was eerily silent as Jensen and his team made their way toward the facility nestled in the mountains. The mist swirled around their legs, and the cold air seemed to cut through their clothing. Their boots crunched against the rocky terrain as they moved in formation, weapons drawn and senses heightened. They knew they were walking into something far bigger than anything they had faced before. The mountain stood tall in the distance, its peak hidden beneath a thick layer of mist. It looked like any other barren world they had visited before, but they knew better now. There was something more lurking beneath this planet's surface, something far more dangerous. Jensen led the group through the rocky landscape, his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement in the distance. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was the same feeling he had gotten when they had first encountered the creature, a feeling that something was lurking just beyond their reach. "Jensen," Maya's voice cut through the tension. "I'm picking up some heat signatures from the facility. We're not alone." The hairs on the back of Jensen's neck stood on end. He had hoped that they would find the place abandoned, but now it seemed that someone, or something, was waiting for them. The possibility of encountering another creature, like the one they had faced, weighed heavily on his mind, but he couldn't let fear cloud his judgment. They had come too far. "Stay close," Jensen ordered. "We go in together. We don't know what's waiting for us inside." The team approached the entrance of the facility. It looked like it had been long abandoned, the once gleaming metal of the doors now rusted and worn. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the place felt unnaturally cold. Jensen motioned for Maya to use the door's control panel. With a few quick keystrokes, the door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor inside. The team moved in quickly, weapons at the ready. The air was heavy, charged with the sense of something powerful lingering just out of sight. They moved through the facility with caution, their footsteps echoing off the walls. The hallways were narrow, and the lighting was dim, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally far. Jensen felt a chill run down his spine as they moved deeper into the heart of the facility. Then, they came to a large chamber. The room was vast, filled with strange, alien technology that hummed and buzzed with a quiet energy. The walls were lined with large tanks, each containing something alive, and as their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they saw what was inside. The creatures, the same creatures they had encountered on the surface. But these weren't the same monsters they had fought. These creatures were different. They had been altered, enhanced. Their limbs were longer, their features more pronounced. And as Jensen realized with a sinking feeling, they were not the only ones in the room. At the far end of the chamber, sitting on a raised platform, was a figure cloaked in shadow. It was humanoid in shape but much taller, its features obscured by the darkness. The team froze, weapons trained on the figure, unsure of what to do next. "I see you found my creations," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant. It sent a shiver through Jensen's spine. "I was wondering when you would come." Jensen's heart raced. This was it, the person, or thing, responsible for creating the monsters they had been hunting. But it wasn't just a scientist. It was something far more terrifying. The figure stood, its long limbs moving with an eerie grace as it stepped into the light. It was an alien, a being unlike anything Jensen had ever seen. Its skin was dark, like polished obsidian, and its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intelligence. It was tall, towering over the team, and its presence was overwhelming. This was the mastermind behind the creatures. "You've been experimenting with these beasts," Jensen said, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to grip him. "Why?" The alien's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Not just experimenting," it replied, its voice cold. "I've been perfecting them, creating the ultimate weapon." These creatures were never meant to be mere predators. They were meant to be soldiers. I have turned them into the perfect weapon, capable of destroying entire civilizations. Jensen's mind reeled. This was worse than they could have ever imagined. These creatures weren't just random predators. They were tools of war, weapons meant to be unleashed upon the galaxy. "You think you can stop me?" the alien said, its eyes flashing. "You've only seen the beginning. The galaxy will tremble before the power I control." The alien raised its hand, and the creatures in the tanks began to stir. Their eyes opened, glowing with an unnatural light, and they began to move toward the team. But Jensen wasn't afraid. He had faced impossible odds before, and he would do it again. "Not if we stop you first," Jensen said, his voice filled with resolve. "This ends now." With a fierce battle cry, the team charged forward, engaging the alien and its creations. The creatures roared, their monstrous forms charging at the team with a terrifying speed. But Jensen and his team were ready. They had faced the beasts before, and now they were ready to face the true threat. The battle raged on, the team working together to take down the creatures and the alien mastermind. It was a fight for survival, and they would stop at nothing to protect the galaxy from this new terrifying weapon. Finally, with a final powerful strike, Jensen took down the alien, sending it crashing to the ground. The creatures, now free of its control, retreated into the shadows. The team stood victorious, breathing heavily but triumphant. They had faced the unimaginable and won. But they knew this was only one battle in a much larger war. The galaxy would never be the same again, and they would be ready for whatever came next. Jensen looked at his team, pride swelling in his chest. "We did it," he said. "We saved the galaxy." And with that, they left the facility behind, knowing that they had prevented an unimaginable terror from being unleashed upon the galaxy.